Sometimes you come across these figures in geopolitics, and it's like they operate in the shadows, but they have this huge influence.
Yeah.
Mohammed Sinwar is one of those figures.
He is, and his story is really interesting, especially because he's right at the center of one of the most talked about conflicts, one of the most volatile ones.
Yeah.
But so many people, I feel like, hadn't heard of him before, all of this recent stuff. It's like he just came out of nowhere. But when you look, he's got this whole history, defied death a bunch of times. He came up through Hamas, and now he's, a pretty major player.
Yeah, if you just look at the surface level, it's like, wait, who is this guy? But then you start digging in, and it really is like something out of a spy thriller.
Totally.
Like, this is a guy who was declared dead at one point,
Yeah.
and now here he is again. So, like, how do we even begin to understand that?
Right.
We need to start with the basics. Who is he? Where does he come from? So, Sinwar was born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in Gaza. And I think it's important for us to remember, these camps were established after the 48 War. They represent a really big part of the Palestinian story. Like, this ongoing displacement is a huge factor in this whole conflict.
And it's more than just a symbol for him. Like, when you look at his family history, it's directly tied to that displacement, right?
Right.
They were part of the exodus from al-Mishdal Ashkelon, that's modern-day Ashkelon, in Israel, during that 1948 war. So to really get what he's about, you have to understand that historical context.
It's like we're talking about generations of displacement and conflict here, and it makes you realize this isn't some abstract political debate for the people involved. This is deeply personal. And knowing that, it's even more striking that Sinwar joins Hamas's military wing when he was just 16 years old.
Yeah, that's not just like dabbling in something. That's a real commitment.
Right.
Like, he was all in, even as a teenager, so clearly. These were issues that really resonated with him.
It's like the stage was set from that moment forward. And you see that as his influence grows. By 2005, he's the commander of Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade. This is a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah, no question. And this isn't just a big deal for him. It really marks a turning point for the entire region, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
You have the 2006 abduction of Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier. That was a bold move. That was Sinwar, and it really put him on the map. You could say that was his coming out party, in a way.
Yeah.
Showed everyone he wasn't afraid to take risks, big risks.
I mean, you're right. The Shili abduction was a huge deal, dominated the news cycle globally. And it wasn't just a political event. It had this huge impact on Israeli society. You could feel it everywhere. But for Sinwar, there was this personal angle, too, right?
Right.
Because the prisoner exchange, the one that eventually freed Shalit, that's the same one that got his brother, Yahya, out.
Right. And we can't underestimate that, those family ties. In Hamas, it's not just about being related. It's a system of loyalty and influence. We see this in other organizations, by the way, especially when the stakes are high and you have to be able to trust the people you're working with completely.
Absolutely. It really highlights how these big geopolitical events have real human consequences. We're talking about families, individuals caught in the middle of all this. And speaking of high stakes, Sinwar's life has been in danger, like constantly.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Six assassination attempts. That's insane. And it shows you the lengths they've been willing to go to.
Six.
Yeah. And he's still here.
Yeah.
Which kind of adds to this mystique he's got. Makes him seem untouchable.
That's a whole other layer to all this. Imagine living under that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
Always looking over your shoulder, wondering if today's the day. And that brings us to 2014 and the Gaza war.
Okay.
So Hamas announces that Sinwar is dead.
Yeah.
But reports suggest he was actually very much alive, probably hiding in that tunnel network under Gaza. Those tunnels, they sound like something out of a movie.
Oh, they're straight out of a spy film.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about some holes in the ground. These are serious constructions, electricity, comms, even places to live. They've really thought of everything. It just shows you how resourceful Hamas can be. Like, how do you even fight that?
Yeah, how do you even fight that? They adapt, they resist, even when it seems impossible.
Totally.
I mean, it really makes you think about how do you even get a handle on what's happening when you have this whole other world underground.
Right, and that's Sinwar, right? Like, he just disappears in these tunnels, and the whole world thinks he's gone, and then he's back.
And then?
So it really makes you think about what else was he up to down there.
Yeah, what was going on during that time? Because fast forward to October 7th, 2023, Sinwar's back in the headlines. But this time, Israeli intelligence is saying he's a major player in this recent Hamas attack on Israel.
Right, and this is where things get a little murky, because you have Israel saying he's the mastermind behind it all, but then you have these other voices in the intelligence community saying, hold on, maybe he wasn't directly involved in the planning.
So are we talking about conflicting intel here? Like, how do we even begin to sort through all that?
I mean, that's the big question, right? Intelligence gathering this part of the world, it's always been a challenge. There's misinformation, propaganda. You never know who's got an agenda. Some reports will point to his history, like how he pulled off the Shellid abduction. That takes some serious planning, you know? They say he understands Israeli tactics better than almost anyone.
So you're trying to put together this puzzle, but some of the pieces might be missing or they might not even belong.
Exactly. And the stakes couldn't be higher. I mean, Israel's put a $300,000 bounty on his head. That tells you something right there.
Wow. That's not something you see every day. What does that tell us about how seriously they're taking this?
It tells you he's enemy number one right now. And bounties, they can be effective. Sometimes they're the only way to get people to talk, to give up information that they wouldn't otherwise.
Okay.
But they can backfire, too. They can make things worse, ramp up the tension. And we have to remember, this isn't just about Mohammed Sinwar. This is bigger than one guy.
Right. It's about the future of Hamas, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the possibility of peace someday.
Exactly. This is about all of it.
And sometimes I think we forget that there are real people caught in the middle of all this. It's easy to get lost in the headlines.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sinwar's story. It's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, but it's a really important piece.
Yeah.
If we really want to understand what's going on inside Hamas, we have to look at guys like him.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Hamas, we haven't really talked about his brother Yahya.
Oh, right. Yahya Sinwar. He was the head of Hamas in Gaza for a while. Talk about keeping it in the family.
Right. It really makes you think about how power works within Hamas. I mean, two brothers at the top. That says something about loyalty, about trust. Some people even say that Yahya, he never really gave up that influence even after he stepped down.
So you're saying he's still pulling the strings?
Maybe. Maybe not.
Ugh.
But it's definitely something to think about. But let's get back to Mohammed Sinwar. Where is he now?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nobody seems to know. It's like he just vanished.
Right. Intelligence agencies all over the world, they're scratching their heads on this one. Some people think he's back in those tunnels.
It wouldn't surprise me. He could disappear in those things like it was nothing.
Exactly. Others think maybe he's not even in Gaza anymore. Maybe he got across the border into another country.
It's crazy to think about someone that important just gone.
I know. But here's the thing. Even though we don't know where he is, Sinwar still matters. He's still a big part of this whole thing, like a ghost hanging over everything.
So what's the answer then? Is Mohammed Sinwar some kind of mastermind calling all the shots from the shadows? Or is he more of a symbol? What does the future hold for him? What about Hamas? Will he ever be caught? Or will he just fade away, become another legend?
Those are the big questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have any easy answers. But what we do know is that Mohammed Sinwar's life tells us a lot about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a complicated story full of twists and turns, and it's definitely not over yet.
It certainly makes you think. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into the world of Mohammed Sinwar. It's a story that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on.